Well, the holiday season might be over, but if you've got a few gift cards laying around after December, I've got a really awesome piece of equipment that I highly recommend for anyone that's working in the live streaming space and live streaming with the Blackmagic ATEM Mini, ATEM Mini Pro, or ATEM Mini ISO. So when the first Blackmagic ATEM Mini came out, this was a fantastic piece of equipment. I mean, for $300, you could get 4 different camera angles into your computer, and pretty much anybody could become a live streamer. But what we quickly found out was that one of the features that many of the pro live streaming units had was something that was actually lacking on the ATEM Mini. Blackmagic later came out with an update, and the ATEM Mini Pro was born. The Pro not only had a built-in encoder, but it also had the multi-view capability. And so the ATEM Mini Pro, you can see it right here, it's been probably one of my favorite devices to use over the last 6 months or so. And the fact that it has multi-view built in has been a huge plus. But there are some limitations, and that's what I wanted to go over today. And this is the solution to that problem. So the problem that we had was, one, the ATEM Mini didn't have a built-in multi-view feature. So when you were switching between your 4 camera angles, you're basically switching blindly. If you've got unmanned cameras, then you don't know what's in frame or if you're switching to the right camera. And if you have manned cameras, you don't know if your camera operator has the shot, if the shot's in focus, if they're in the right position. They could be pointing it at a wall, and you'd have no way of knowing until you switched to that camera angle and you saw it on your program feed. So with the ATEM Mini, everybody was crying, we need multi-view, we can't use this. And I have to say that at a $300 price point, the ATEM Mini itself is made for the podcasters, the home DIYers. It was made for people that weren't all too concerned with that feature, because at the end of the day, it's a $300 product. This was not something that was made for the professionals to use. But of course, like myself, like many others out there, we're constantly trying to push the limit as to what we can do with these. And so the ATEM Mini could really use this piece of equipment that Seetec came out with. Seetec is also known as FeelWorld. You've probably seen tons of their monitors, and they came out with this monitor. It's a quad view monitor, and when you're looking for it online, you may see it called Seetec or you may see it called FeelWorld. It's essentially the same thing, the same company. Mine says Seetec on it just because I bought it directly from one of my connections at the manufacturer, and so it is the same monitor if you go on B&H and buy it. If you're looking for the Seetec model, I've seen it called the Seetec ATEM 156, which stands for 15.6 inches, which is the size of this monitor. And if you're on B&H Photo, you can look for the FeelWorld. I believe it's called the Quad Link monitor or multi-view monitor. Now this monitor is 15.6 inches, which I think is a great size for taking on the road, and actually it fits perfectly into this case that I got from Harbor Freight Tools. So this is an Apache case. See if we can get the model there. The Apache 4800, and this came from Harbor Freight Tools, and what I love about this is that it's basically a knockoff Pelican case. They're super hard shell, protective. It comes with the pick and pluck foam inside, so you can pull the foam out and get it fitting just how you need it for this monitor. And I believe they're really well priced. I think they came in at somewhere around $45, give or take, and there's always coupons out there. So if you have a Harbor Freight near you, you're not concerned about having the Pelican name brand, and you want to have a good protective case, I highly recommend the Apache line of cases. And I'll make another video another day showing off some of those different cases. But this fits perfectly into that. Let's talk about the monitor itself. So the monitor came with this stand, and you can loosen and tighten it up so that you can tilt this any which way you want to. I did find that the stand itself is rather thin, and I'm going to go ahead and flip this sideways here so you can see. This is pretty thin. And for the tables that we bring out to our live streams, it's those sort of portable fold-up tables. They're kind of plasticky, so they're a little bit slippery. And so I've been finding myself actually having to gaff tape this down to the table, because if we're tugging on wires or moving stuff around, I was a little bit concerned about this falling off the table. So just make sure if you do get this, be prepared to either find a different way to mount it or, have some way to weigh it down or tape it down on the bottom so that it doesn't fall or slip off your table. Now on the front of it, we've got a whole bunch of buttons and controls, and I'm hoping you guys can see this in the camera here, but I'll run down the line. So the first ones are HDMI 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you can actually select to full screen and HDMI input. And now I only have one camera plugged in right now. It's this one right over here, just for the purposes of demonstration so you can see this. So if I switch to HDMI 2, you're not going to see anything, but it should let you know usually, yeah, no signal. So it will let you know if it doesn't have a video on the screen. So HDMI 1, that's if we want to see this as just the full screen view of one shot. Now, if we're trying to switch over to the quad link view, you've got a couple of function buttons over here on the end, F1, 2, 3, and 4. And I just know that 4 is the one that's going to switch us over to our quad view. It's pretty quick to switch that over. And I'm going to talk a little bit as to why you would need this outside of the ATEM line of live stream switchers, because for those of you who are like me and have the ATEM Mini Pro or the Pro ISO, you have Multiview built in, but I still think there's a reason why you need this. And then I'll dive back into more of the techie stuff surrounding this. So for one, if you've got the ATEM Mini, you don't have Multiview. So in general, this is going to be helpful because you've got 4 HDMI ins, and then you also have 4 HDMI loop outs. That means that you can take your 4 camera angles into this device and loop them out and into your ATEM Mini Pro, or ATEM Mini Pro ISO. So that basically gives you a multi-view monitor in line before the camera signals are actually hitting your switcher. With the ATEM Mini, this is a fantastic option because you've just given yourself multi-view without actually having multi-view. Now, you'll miss a couple things, right? Like if you're using the built-in graphics feature to put up some lower thirds on screen or anything like that, you're not going to see those graphics until they actually hit the program feed. This is okay for many people. Just the fact that you don't have to switch blindly anymore is a huge, huge step up. Now, some of you might say, oh, well, why not just pay the extra money? The Mini is $300 and the Mini Pro is $600. Why not just pay the extra $300? Well, maybe you already have the Mini and you don't want to go through the process of selling it, upgrading, buying a new one, because I'm going to tell you why in a moment. You're probably still going to want this, okay? So I'm going to explain why. So let's say you've got the ATEM Mini Pro or you have the ISO model. Here's why you might actually still want this monitor and why I use this all the time. So like I said, it's got the 4 HDMI inputs and the 4 HDMI loop outs. Now, you don't need that if you're using the built-in multiviewer, correct? Well, here's the thing. The ATEM Mini Pro has the 4 HDMI inputs, right? And then you've got your 1 HDMI output, your USB-C output, and then your Ethernet if you're using the built-in encoder and sending a video signal straight to something like Facebook or YouTube using an RTMP. Okay? Now, let's say you've got an event or a conference like I have had many of over the last 6 months, and the event is in Zoom. Okay? So to get that video signal into Zoom, you have to use the USB output. You need a USB-C cable that goes from the switcher to the computer so that Zoom sees it as a webcam. It's not easy to do that with the Ethernet cable, and you can't do that directly with the HDMI port unless you have another capture card. So if you're using the USB-C, you've now used up your slot for recording the program feed onto a hard drive, because you can't plug a hard drive into anywhere else except for the USB-C slot. And you need the USB-C slot so that your computer sees the switch program feed as if it were a webcam plugged into your computer. Well, now let's say you want to be able to record the program feed as well, and you've got something like an Atomos Ninja or the Shogun 7 like I'm using right over here off to the side, and you use that as a recorder and also to see your program feed. So you plug in the HDMI out, you've got your program feed, you can record that on your recorder, you've got your USB-C, you can take that out, and then you can go ahead and put that into your Zoom. Where's your multiview? If you needed multiview, you'd have to use the HDMI output into your Shogun, and then you can't actually record a program feed in full, ProRes if you're using the Shogun or if you're using the Ninja and you want that high quality recording of it. you won't be able to use that because the multi-view is playing out over that, and you'd be recording the whole multi-view with all the little boxes and camera angles. So you've lost multi-view in that specific instance. That's where this device comes in. Put this in line with your cameras and then loop the cameras through to the ATEM Mini Pro. You've now just added the multi-view back to this, and you can still switch between your 4 different camera angles when you're sending your feed over the USB-C to Zoom, to Skype, to other destinations. I don't know, for some of you, you may feel more comfortable just hitting the go live button on Facebook and YouTube, and so maybe you're just using the USB-C out and you're not as familiar with using the Ethernet port for being able to send information and data out over the built-in encoder. So that's one reason why I recommend using this. The other reason why I recommend using this is because when you've got a client with you, and sometimes clients like to sit over your shoulder, you can basically just put this between you and the client, and they can see all 4 camera angles. And if they're kind of a micromanager, you can basically say, hey, look here, you can watch this. Now, another reason why I like putting this in line is because it actually has a built-in headphone jack right down here in the bottom left corner, and that means that I can monitor audio. Now, you might think if we've got 4 different cameras plugged in and we're running our audio typically through the camera so that it hits the switcher in sync and we don't have to worry about sync issues, would you hear all 4 at once, or would you hear just one? Well, what's great about this monitor is you can go into the settings and you can select which camera you want to listen to over the headphone jack output. So this is something that I've also done for the client so that they can hear that the sound is good, because I will tell you that some people over Zoom or people who just aren't as familiar with using a computer will say, oh, it sounds weird, there's something wrong with the sound or whatever. And there's so many different tech problems that come up, but you can go to the client and say, look, the headphones plugged into this is what Zoom is receiving. So that's just another way that people can kind of listen to and monitor it. You can get the client kind of pushed off to the side so they're leaving you alone. And I think that it's just a fantastic option for you to have a much bigger screen than, say, a 5-inch Ninja or, the 7-inch Shogun. It's going to be 15.6 inches. Now, one other thing that I wanted to show off is that on the side here, I don't know if you can see, but there are mounting holes so that you could rack mount this inside a rack mount case. So if you have road cases, if you have a fly pack, if you're trying to make this as portable as possible and you don't want to just shove it in a case with the power cord, maybe you're trying to do a build out and you want to build it into the case like some people I've seen do on YouTube. This is a great way that you can go ahead and mount that. There's actually brackets that I asked Seetec for, and they did send me the brackets so that I could rack mount this if I wanted to. Going to hop back into the back side of this here just to talk about a couple more features as we go along. So you can now see the back side. Not only do we have a Visa mount, but it's got 2 different sets of holes depending on the size of the Visa mount that you're using. I like this little piece here. It's just kind of like a handle, so it's easier for holding and carrying it as we move it somewhere. We've got the battery mount here, so you could power this via a V-mount battery. I imagine it wouldn't be all that hard to get an adapter so that you could plug in some Sony batteries into this. Your power's on the bottom right. Your 4 HDMI inputs on the top, your 4 HDMI loop outs on the bottom. It's really just a phenomenal display at 15.6 inches. Now, another way that I recommend you consider using this is that if you want to be able to monitor just maybe one of your main cameras, like for example, I have someone who comes in for live streams and he typically has PowerPoint slides. So let's say our PowerPoint slides were on input number 1. I've actually labeled it camera 1 plus PC because the ATEM Mini Pro's HDMI input 1 has a different color space than the other 2, 3, and 4. So input 1, I believe I've learned, is a YUV and RGB color space, and that's why it's typically better to plug in a computer into input 1, and some cameras may have trouble with a signal if they're plugged into input 1 and not 2, 3, or 4. I'll get into that later. You can use a decimator to convert it, but basically, let's say we've got their PowerPoint and input 1. If you were using your typical multiviewer and going into, say, a 5-inch monitor, you absolutely could not see what is on that person's PowerPoint slides. And it would be much harder for you to know when to switch and to bring up those PowerPoint slides unless your multiviewer was going into a larger screen, say the Sumo 19. But I'm betting you probably don't want to spend a couple $1,000s on a monitor when you could spend about $450 for one like this. So if we wanted to zoom into that camera shot right there, all we do is hit HDMI 1 and I can bring it up full screen and I can see the slides and I can tell what's going on, and it's way easier for me to switch back and forth between the person and the slides than it is if I'm either A, flying blindly and just taking a guess, or B, trying to watch a much smaller screen. And you can see how quick and easy it is to switch back and forth here. So I really like that. There's some other built-in features. I believe you can pull up zebras. I think there's false color. There may even be peaking. So there's quite a lot of features packed into this thing. I could go on and on for days, and I don't want to waste any more of your time. But all I'll say is that I believe that this item is still worth having in your kit, regardless of whether or not you're using the ATEM Mini Pro, ATEM Mini Pro ISO, or even just the regular ATEM Mini. I still think it's going to be really helpful to have because you can loop those inputs straight into here. Now, this has been kind of a long video tutorial explainer of how this works, but I really think that this is one of your best buys if you've got some extra gift cards laying around, some extra money from the holidays. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up below. Hit that subscribe button so that we can let you know when we're releasing more videos about live streaming equipment, video production gear, and more. Thanks for watching. See you next time.